We are live. David Osk, how you doing today?
I'm well. It's a beautiful day outside of Nashville. Kind of a little bit fall rainy, but it's been a good one.
Awesome. We are going with a Halloween theme today as we're heading into the Halloween weekend. First off, you got any plans for Halloween?
We're actually going over to some friends' house. We live out in the country, but they live in a subdivision. So there's going to be a bunch of kids coming by. So we're going to bring some chairs and goodies and just hang out in their front yard.
Awesome. Yeah, we got the kids. We got Anna from Frozen, and we've got Boba Fett.
Yeah.
I have an old Yoda mask that I can put on. Just kind of walk around with that on. Growing up, it's interesting. My mom, who, if you knew her, you wouldn't think that Halloween would be one of her favorite, holidays. But
Yeah.
she loved to get the house and really make it spooky. And she had 2 years in a row. One year where my stepdad created a coffin.
Yeah.
And in this coffin, my mom was able to get in it, and we put her in a full-on, thing. And then I was on a walkie-talkie, and we had strobe lights, and we had, the whole house was like really all, kind of spooky. So as
That's
people
cool.
were walking up to get candy, she would pop out of the coffin right as they got close. And there was like, kids were terrified to come to our house. There was a dad that was trying to, get his kid to have the courage to come up.
Yeah.
And so he's like, there's no one in this coffin. And then my mom popped out. The dad ran and booked all the way down the cul-de-sac. So,
That's so great.
was a lot of fun. And I say that as a nice lead-in or segue that, oftentimes the scariest things about, whether it's Halloween or our everyday experience, the scariest costumes we can possibly wear are the ones that exist within us, in our subconscious, the kind of thoughts, the shadow part of ourselves, these repugnant aspects of how we see ourselves, these things that feel unlovable, these really shame-based, there are parts of myself that I do not like facing. There's moments when the judgment comes in, and I can feel myself like that shame experience. There's a pit in this, in your stomach. You feel it's a painful going within. Sometimes you even depersonalize, right? There's almost a sense of like, not being in the present moment at all. And so, to me, that is the scariest parts of my life. It's certainly the scariest costume that I put on. However, I'm going to make an argument that choosing to move towards that part of ourselves, right, and having the ability to start to accept and to love those aspects of ourselves, that is the key to switching the costume, right, from this shame-based, scary parts of ourselves, that they are the key to actually becoming the superhero, right, the most powerful, where we really step into our most authentic selves. I don't think it's possible outside of going through the shadow. Like, I think it's necessary to embrace that part of yourself to really be able to put on the superhero identity. So what do you think about that? Any personal experiences, stories? What's your feedback on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is like I was, moments where I'm trying to grapple with a particular concept. I try to like think about, well, when didn't I feel like that? So that I kind of know it's there. So it's one of those things where, when I have tasted those moments where I'm not wearing, the mask, and I'm feeling, peaceful inside and purpose driven and energetic, and like all of the, the best qualities in myself are rising to the top, and I'm able to use them in a way that is meaningful to the, the people around me. And I see that impact, like, and it feels good. I've realized, well, there's a lot of times I don't, sense that, I don't feel that. And there's some apprehension when I'm in a room. There's some, or sometimes just flat dead avoidance. Like I'm not going in there because I don't know how to be in that space, that kind of thing, just avoid certain situations and so on. But yeah, I mean, I think that everybody that's ever walked on this earth has felt that sensation where they're kind of wearing a mask, and there's something about them that they don't like, that they're ashamed of, that kind of thing. And of course, I'll kind of tie it up with this. We've all said that phrase, right? I say things to myself that I wouldn't say to my worst enemy. And that's really true. It's amazing how you said you kind of dehumanize yourself for a moment and just you know, tear yourself down. And anyway, but absolutely, yeah.
It's interesting. There's a story. It's not going to sound very scary, right? And it has kind of a humorous. But there was a time in my life where I had joined a men's group and was going to it on a regular basis, and it was a kind of a therapeutic group, and was getting a lot out of it, but certainly didn't feel very secure in who I was. I mean, far from it. Was trying to get there,
Sure.
but for some reason, the leader of this group, I don't know why, but he thought my name was Tim, right? And so he started to refer to me as Tim, and this went on for like weeks and weeks. I mean, months really. Bye Tim, see you next week, and I never corrected him. And it wasn't until a friend came with me one time, right? And as the leader was checking out and was saying bye to me, he said, "Why did he just call you Tim?" And I said, "Well, that's, obviously he thinks that's my name." He said,
Yeah.
"Well, why haven't you corrected him?" And it was amazing, right? That's the scary part of myself. I was scared to even stand up and claim my actual name, right? It was like, if he needs me to be, I had gotten so used to putting on masks and just kind of, conforming to who people needed me to be,
Right.
that literally in this moment, I was like, if he needs me to be Tim, I'll be Tim, right? And my friend said, no, you're going to go right now and you're going to tell him what your name is. And I argued with my friend. I was like, no, I'm not. And,
Yeah.
he put his foot down, and it was that thing where I had to go and kind of face. This wasn't necessarily me choosing to love and accept that scary part, but it was at least, recognizing that I need to go claim, my name in this moment. And so I went up and I told him, I said, hey, this is a little awkward, right? Because it's been a while, but my name's actually Andy, and he was like, why didn't you tell me? And it was a mixture of like fear and shame going up
Sure.
there, but relief too, right? The ability to finally just stand up and acknowledge who I am felt very empowering, although I was very nervous doing it. And again, I understand it might seem like a silly example, but that's, I got so used to putting on masks everywhere I went that I really lost any sense. I think I've shared the story too, that I had good social skills and I knew how to make lots of friends. And so I'd be at parties surrounded by people that, you should think, well, here's someone that really should be socially fulfilled. And man, I really wasn't, because I was filled with dread or terror that at any point people are going to start matching stories I'm telling them, right? And they're going to see
Yeah.
inconsistencies, and the mask is, the series of masks that I wear are going to come falling off, and it's going to be exposed that, man, I don't like myself and I don't know who I am. So,
I was thinking when you were saying that, conflict, of course, is, never comfortable, right? It's not like we go seeking for it, even on a small level like that. Say, oh, hey, actually, my name's David, that kind of thing. But what's fascinating is I think there's this underlying tone of, if I don't, whether I realize it or not, if I'm not operating in, my authenticity, and if I'm not, coming to a certain, person's presence or room, whatever, feeling like I'm here, right? If I'm wearing a mask, well, I think there's this underlying tone then. If I walk up to this person and correct them, or there's some type of a conflict, or especially if I like them, right? If they don't like the real me, let alone the masked me, you know, it's there. I think there's this apprehension, like, well, what if he doesn't even like the mask? What if, we're kind of handing somebody the keys, as it were. But I think a lot of times, though, we don't do that consciously. I mean, I really think that if you live your life in an inauthentic state
yeah,
for so long, you really don't have any idea that you're doing it, because most of our culture does that. So what are those signs of that authenticity that I think are front and center? I mean, just that, avoidance of things like that, feeling less than, your, avoidance, your um, I think on a very real level, you're very self-focused,
yeah,
and sometimes you don't even realize it. But I think this idea of anxiety and fear in a social situation is because you just don't have a real authentic sense of self. Like, who am I? What do I want to bring to bear in this room? If the opportunity arises, not that you need to have some agenda, but
yeah,
when you enter a room and there's that social anxiety, well, I think it's telling that you're like, ooh, everybody, I handed the keys to everybody else here to the car. And if
yep,
they don't start up my car, they don't like me and approve of me, that kind of stuff. I mean, of course you're afraid. as
Yeah,
opposed to, I'm not necessarily thinking about what I need right now because I feel rather full. I want to
yeah,
look for somebody who feels lonely. I
that's
want to look
good.
for somebody who may not even know that they're not operating in an authentic, genuine space. So I think there's some really easy ways to tell if you're operating in that inauthentic space. Is just a level of anxiety when you're with other people,
Yeah,
especially new people.
yeah, I
Does that make sense?
fully agree. We have internal signs, right? There are
Yeah.
cues that if we are attuned to them and we don't just, avoid them or try and distract ourselves or medicate them or whatever, right? We often know, when we are out of alignment. I can tell when I'm acting in a way, right? I'm treating someone, I'm treating myself. I mean, I can feel this tension inside.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There is sometimes I get a pushback just on the notion of authenticity, and this happens, I think, with well-intentioned people where they feel like it's well, it's this focus on yourself, right? Shouldn't we be focused on others? And I certainly get the notion, but the truth is that selfishness is a reflection of insecurity,
Yeah.
right? And so, when you feel unsafe, when you feel insecure with yourself, then you're more focused on your needs, right? You're more focused on your feelings, all these things, right? You're hyper focused on them,
And it
and
makes
so
sense. It kind of
yeah,
makes sense, right? If I'm thirsty, right? If I'm feeling thirsty inside, like I need to be filled,
yeah,
like it would make sense. I'm always looking for something. I'm to fill, to feed me, that kind of stuff emotionally. So
yeah,
on a very practical level, it makes sense.
yeah. And when you take the time to develop a secure foundation, a base of authenticity, which what we focus on in the work that we do, it really you operate out of that fullness, and because you have that basic sense, you feel safe, right? And that allows you then to be more focused. And I think what people are talking about, right, that outward focus. But I can tell you, if you don't know what's driving your behavior, there's many times where I'm like, all right, the key to happiness is like
Yeah.
focusing on others, but I was doing it through the lens of what am I getting in return, right? So I'm going to be kind,
Right.
I'm going to do this good act, and then I was expecting to be filled with happiness. I was expected to be affirmed. I was expected for people to like me, and that it's a subtle kind of difference, because it's still you could say, well, it's still nice to pour into others,
Sure.
but the lens, the motivation that drives it that will determine whether or not it actually produces happiness, right?
Yeah.
And the person receiving it also is impacted, right? If there's a sense that it feels transactional, it's like, hey, this person's being nice, but why do I feel like, I've just been, given a burden or a debt that I have to pay back? It really, you see this, whether it's in work, you're trying to land a sell, and you're going to do something nice, but you're like, I know in return they're expecting me to pay for this. It didn't
Yeah.
feel like it was done with sincerity or genuineness,
Right.
and it ends up lacking, right? Kind of. But when you choose to pour into someone because it's just a reflection of, hey, I'm full and I want to pour into you because I genuinely care about you, and it makes me feel great to just be good to you. The person receives that in a way that feels safe and secure, and it will light you up as the giver, it will light them up as the receiver. And we talk about sometimes a virtuous loop. That's how then people want to rise up to meet you there, and
Right.
it's done in a
Right.
very authentic manner. Does that make sense?
Yes. And even as you're saying that, right, my uh, specific people in my life come to mind exactly when I are examples of that. So when I'm standing next to that person, or I'm in the same room with that person, or the phone rings, right, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get the um to answer the phone, because this person is always just filling my cup. They're wanting to add value no matter what.
Yeah,
And it's just, there's such a pleasure to be with. There's a It's funny, Parker was talking the other day about the word charisma, and I think, and that's kind of, in some ways it's an old word, or in some ways it's a bit of a schmaltzy kind of a word. But there's something that is, when someone is full inside, there's something so uh you know I don't know, that word just rings true. There's
yeah,
something that is dynamic about them, and it's very genuine. Like you're not thinking in the back of your mind, like, what do they want? In fact, I remember having a couple of people call me in my other business wanting to sell me something, but you know how they started out the conversation? They said, they brought it up right away. Hey, guess what? Of course, I'm in business to make money and to sell you something. But David, I want to add value to you no matter what. Even if you don't buy, I'm going to leave this conversation where you're thinking, hey, how can I use this guy as a tool in my belt for anything? Honestly, it was so genuine. I thought, so of course I remembered their name and I believed them. And
Yeah.
I didn't sense that it was a kind of a reverse psychology kind of way to make a sale. It was like, wow, I didn't buy anything from them, but I still remember these guys.
I'm going to go off probably on a little bit. I know we're talking about wear masks, but I had a conversation with someone just yesterday, and they were talking about they had a comment on capitalism, right? Saying that it's kind of evil and it's a cause of all this greed. And I just said, well, I think capitalism is amazing. It's what helps to spur innovation and creativity and growth, and competition is great. I said, but I think conscious capitalism, or what we refer to as like, doing business authentically.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, right? When suddenly you add in this commitment to doing good, specifically what good, and it's not just good because it produces the bottom line, right? Because it makes the board of directors or, happy, but it's like, hey, we have a business that's profitable and it's making a dent in the universe, right? That's positive, that reverberates, has this ripple effect.
Yeah.
I mean, that I don't think it gets any better than that, right? And I think having a commitment to that and knowing specifically what your identity is as wherever you're at in your career, or if you are a business owner, right, knowing what that identity is that has that virtuous kind of commitment.
I love that.
So
I love that. And talk about when you're in that state, right, back to the mask thing, it's like when you're operating on that level, there's no mask. I like the dent in the universe. I forget who said that, but it's
Steve
like,
Jobs.
yeah, but it just makes it just makes you I don't know, it rings true. It's like, man, I made a difference. You can see the results of what, the impact literally, right, that I just had. And it kind of, I don't know, there's something really inspiring about that. So tell me this, at the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about the shadow, and obviously there's some shadows in us. We kind of understand, okay, what does it look like not to wear the mask? But when we wear the mask, how do we take the mask off? Because some of those shadows are painful, right? There were some things in us that could be just habit, but there could be some trauma. There could be some, some things that were messages that we were told over time that just really sank into our psyche that we believe about ourselves. How do you get through that?
Yeah. First off, I want to just at least acknowledge Jacqueline. I agree. It is fun to watch lives change. I don't know that it gets, certainly speaking for myself, I don't know it gets much better than that. It is one of the most exciting experiences to be able to participate in and contribute to. So usually what gets into the subconscious is things that we hear with repetition, right? We hear them over and over again. So there's some element of consistency, or things that had a strong emotional impact. There was a moment where I remember I used a word that was inappropriate at a Catholic school, and I got pinched by my ear it was a mom that overheard it. I heard it in a movie and I didn't even know what it meant. I reused it. I'm not going to say what it was here, right? But it's from E.T. And so this mom grabbed my ear and brought me in, right? And that forever. And there's an element. They actually got the soap bar out. They didn't actually put it in my mouth, but they put it out there. So anyways, there's these powerful, like these moments that have these strong emotions attached to them that tend to get seared into our memory banks.
Right.
Fascinating. Dan Gilbert, I'm a huge fan of. He has a quote or a question that he asked. He said, would you rather have a moment of ecstasy that is forever remembered as torture? Or would you rather have a moment of torture that is forever remembered as ecstasy? I don't remember if he used the word ecstasy, right? But it's amazing how the meaning we attach to what happens, right, completely determines, to some extent, our identity. And in fact, some of the work that we do that gets to your question, there's this benefit finding exercise. How do you go back and look at some of those moments where maybe you created inauthentic identity, right? Maybe you believed that you were unlovable. For me, maybe I believed I was invisible, these things. And so how are you able to go back in those moments and to recognize, hey, you certainly acknowledge the pain, recognize that, love it, have compassion, but is there any way that those experiences might have benefits in them? And oftentimes they are, because they are, where we develop our character strengths.
Yeah.
It's how I develop compassion and why I do what I do today, right? I understand how important it is to notice people, right? And to see the real them. And the more that you're able to see in them, right, kind of what is most authentic and unique is life changing. People have spoken identity into me in a way where they've noticed me that it literally changed the trajectory of my life. And so, I think those are some of the things. And I think it's absolutely essential on some level. We have to acknowledge what's in the closets, right? What's in the shadows. And we have to ideally learn how to accept, right? Stop running from it, uh, and get comfortable with it and learn how to love it, because that when you learn how to do that, it is absolutely transformational. Does that
Yeah,
that make
yeah,
sense?
I love that. And here's what's really neat is, we often think about this whole idea of, okay, there's some things about my psyche that, patterns in life, rhythms, tempo, whatever you want to call it, I don't like, right? I got to get back to zero. Mm-mm. It gets so much better than that. And that's why, of course, with your, the Authentic Growth Blueprint course, right? We do this in community. I'll tell a quick story. So a mutual friend of ours, David Ash, I was, I think in one of these, and this is the reason I will never forget it. I felt like I was kind of operating in that highest state, right? We're engaged, we're talking, and I'm being fully alive. And then he looks at me and he goes, David, you're made of awesome. We'll talk about a galvanizing moment of identity, right? So what I love is it's not going from the shadow self to zero. And I'll be honest, I think that you often use the word superpower, right? It's going from the shadow self, being thankful for those things, the hard things, because they gave you more tools in your belt than you can count. But then it's going into that superhero phase where when you
Right.
operate without that mask, when you bring the fullest sense of who you are to all those situations. Honestly, here's what I mean. You talked about this at the beginning, this extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. When you're operating on the intrinsic motivation, well, then you end up getting some feedback from peers and people that you have an impact on. Sometimes it's just a smile, right? Sometimes it's hey David, you're made of awesome, that was great, that kind of thing. And but I love this idea of going from something, if you will, to something that feels very authentic. When we always say your energy rises. I mean, talk about that superpower moment. You lay your head down at night and you're just thinking, man, I did these things today that felt like I was flying. And it was so me. And again, I look back in my life, and because I lacked identity, I felt like I should be like other men, especially around me, right?
Yep.
Well, now that I know exactly who I am, the impact that I want to have, there's a lot of days I feel like Superman. Like it's just like, holy smokes, that felt really good to be me.
Yeah, I love that. And so appreciate Meta and Jacqueline. I agree. I think this notion of being in the present, right, is absolutely essential. And shame is really a powerful way to get you out of the present, right? I mean, it's literally like this going within, and it's like the outside world ceases to almost exist. It's a really painful introspection. Anxiety, obviously, we know is kind of this future oriented depression. So
Yeah.
the capacity to just breathe, right? I probably will say this maybe on every call. My favorite personal development quote from Viktor Frankl is, between a stimulus, between what happens to us and our response, there's a space. And in that space is where our capacity for growth and freedom exists. And so that ability, sometimes when something happens, right? Someone says something, I get turned down, I lose a client, whatever it might be. My wife says something that hurts my feelings. The ability to not let the emotion take me out of, but to breathe, acknowledge the feeling. I'm not saying the feeling isn't important. In fact, that feeling is often, right, it's a navigational tool. It often will help tell us, like, what is that emotion trying to tell me? Where
Yeah.
is it helping to lead me?
Yeah.
And I think something we haven't touched upon that I think is really critical in all this is being able to access your values and all this, understanding what really matters, right? So in that moment, someone says something, I feel this moment of shame, I breathe, I accept it, and then how do I anchor myself? How do I tether myself to something that is substantive, right? Something that has real significance. And that's going to help me really to pivot, right, into more of a authentic response and more towards that superhero, right? I think the superhero-ness comes more out of our virtues.
Yeah.
Our values are just represent, kind of the what defines us, the most
Oh,
true essence of who we are.
yeah,
And
that
so,
authenticity, the authorship, right? Absolutely, I love that bedrock. I love, I think the word authenticity was just, silly. Not anymore. I'm loving that sense, the authorship that's in me. That's the bedrock stuff that makes me different from you, right? We're very different people and different from, my brother and my dad, my wife, my son, and at the same time, then to be able to look at other people's authenticity and really honor that and to speak to it and to call it out and to enrich it, that kind of thing. Real quick, I want to make a comment on the Frankel quote. Stimulus, response, in the middle, there's growth and freedom, you said.
right.
And I think that, honestly, there's a lot of people that when they think about growth, they're like, oh gal, there's something else I got to do. It just seems like this heavy word, like it's a bunch of work. And what I love though is if you grab onto the word freedom, what would it feel like for you to walk into a room and feel free? What would wrap your mind around that? I mean, that moment of being able to choose something, right? And of course, we're wanting people to even, choose your course, right? The Authentic Growth Blueprint. So, by the way, if you're listening to this, please reach out to Dr. Andy or myself to learn more about this. But what would it look like? What does freedom look like for you? Where do you feel like you got some shackles on? You're like, dang it, I can't wrap my mind around this. Or when I'm with this in this crowd or doing this type of thing, I'm wearing a mask and it stinks. And I want to take the mask off and celebrate the absolute fullest version of myself and hang out with people, right, that will celebrate the fullest version of who I am. It does not get any better than that. And so I think that word freedom there really rings true to me even today.
And I know we're gonna have to wrap things up here in the next couple of minutes, but I would certainly agree. Choosing to wear the mask, choosing not to grow, is actually the much more difficult path,
Yeah.
right? You're carrying all this baggage, right? You're choosing, and there's this accumulation of, right, whether it's things that haven't been dealt with, procrastinate. The more we procrastinate, the more difficult it is to take action, right? It's like the sense of, oh no, now I'll never be able to catch up, just builds and builds and builds. And so the more that you're able to, take forward action, and that's not, we're not talking necessarily these grand moments, right, of putting on a cape. It's every decision that we make, it's ideally either moving us closer and closer towards our values, right? We're moving towards, being intrinsically motivated, virtuous actions, core values. And the more we do that, right, we are becoming more free. We are becoming more and more of who we really are, who we were created to be. And the more we deny that, right, the more that we react out of fear, ego, insecurity, right? That shadow remains hidden and we avoid it, right? It anchors us more and more to, all the inauthentic parts of ourselves, the parts that we weren't designed to live in, right? And there's a reason why those things have negative repercussions. There's a reason why that leads to anxiety and depression and shame and all those things, right?
Right.
And so it's actually a much easier path to move towards that freedom and growth in there.
Outstanding. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Love the comments, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome. Love that. I'll tell you just a quick story. So when it comes to, kind of wearing this mask and not, in my, teens and 20s, maybe early 30s, I honestly, I felt like it was, for a man to show emotion, like if I got weepy about something good, right? Whether it was a movie or my kids, stuff like that, to cry. I've always been pretty emotional. At the same time, I felt kind of embarrassed about that kind of thing. So I had a neat experience today. So, my daughter Kate plays the violin, and she and I went over to rehearse with my friend Kim this afternoon. And we're sitting in their living room. It's Kim and his wife and Kate are playing. And of course, I burst into tears because I'm playing, doing music with a dear brother. And then to have my 14-year-old daughter be standing there playing the violin is just, I mean, it was just so overwhelming. But what I love is I didn't care one bit. Of course, Kate looks at me like, kind of, oh, Dad, whatever it is, but I didn't care. You know what I mean? Like it felt beautiful to me just to like obviously in that moment, my body couldn't contain my emotions. They had just to come out, right? And sort of feel uh, authentic and still feel, me and powerful, if you will, in that moment. I mean, that's really a shift from where I was, in my 20s. And so I'm grateful for that sense of self and confidence in that area.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's I'll share my little story that was remarkable for me. I there's someone that I've known for a long time who's going through a tough time right now, and so I sent them really thoughtful. I put together a message to send them just to let them know that I support them, shared a story with them, and that and sent it, and didn't get a response. But an interesting thing is, right? You should probably say, well, why does it matter? I didn't send it for that. But in the past, I would have, right? I would have put together this heartfelt thing, but internally, I would have been like, please affirm me, right? Please tell me that that was really impactful.
Yeah.
It's been 4 days, and I sent it not because I needed that person to tell me thank you. I genuinely sent it because I was like, hey, this is from my heart, right? This is something I feel is important for me to say, and I feel great. The fact that I just sent it, and imagine now, carrying that into a marriage. Imagine carrying that into, kids. Imagine doing that in business,
Yeah.
where now I'm starting to just, engage with people, not out of what do you have in it for me, but like, hey, it's in my heart to want to do this for you. And
Yeah.
so the more that you give, it's a great book that you actually handed off to me, The Go Giver, right? And it very much aligns with a lot of things that we say, but this idea, it's like the law of compensation,
Yeah.
that we are compensated in correlation with how much that we give. I'm probably butchering that.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about, we're not doing it for the compensation, but the more that we give freely, it's amazing. We get way more back, and
Unbelievable.
it
Yeah.
feels better. So
It is. And it's, I mean, even, in scriptures, it just says it's better to give than to receive. I've for years, I looked at like that was somehow earning something. Nope. I just think it's very simple. It's just better. It's like chocolate's better than vanilla. It's just better. It just feels great. It's just the practicality of it is so, profound. It's marvelous,
what
man.
what's funny, it took us a little full circle, right? Because we
Yeah.
talked about this notion of focusing on others first. And so then here we are saying, well, it feels better to give than receive. And it might seem like, well, aren't those incompatible, right? Aren't you speaking out of both sides of your mouth? And I would say no, that, because it's important to start from a foundation, right? It's kind of that, I'm sure most people have heard this metaphor, but on the airplanes, when they make sure to tell parents or tell everyone, right, that to make sure you put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And it's because they know, right, especially parents, especially moms, right, that the first thing they'll do is take care of their kids. They'll
Yeah.
immediately go to that. But unfortunately, what's going to happen is they're going to pass out. And then as they're passed out state, they're no good to help their kids out.
Yeah.
And so there's this notion of, right, when we first take the moment to just love and accept ourselves, and obviously we think there's a certain framework to really understand who you are, right, to really, and when you resolve that existential question of who am I, it's amazing. It really is amazing how that then becomes so much easier to grow, to maximize, the capacity
Yeah.
for growth and
The
freedom, all that.
glass off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you're putting something on it. You're just removing it, and I can breathe. I'm free to be me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
that. This is such a great topic. And I don't think there's anybody, listening who would, who doesn't relate to this in some way. And and like I said before, it's when you hang around with, all of us can think of, a few people in our lives that we know the mask is gone. It's off. And to hang out with somebody like that, it's like, what in the world? There's something so different and so fulfilled, so full about them. And they're not looking all the time for that fulfillment. They're just bringing the fullness of who they are to experience fulfillment. And to me, that is my definition of being, authentic, or where is it, fully alive, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not looking anymore. It's just, you can just anchor to those deepest truths about yourself, the deepest, most authentic things, and run.
I will add, so Meta, I really appreciate, and the comment she just made about the only thing we can think of is giving when we are calm inside.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I love my occasional Star Wars references, but Luke, when he was struggling with, is he going to have to defeat Vader? Vader represented his shadow self, right? In this hero's journey. What was he going to do with this? Because he was struggling, right? He didn't want to kill his dad, but he was being told that's what was necessary. And so he asked Yoda, how will I know the difference between good and evil? And Yoda responds, and I'm not going to do a Yoda voice, but he says, you will know the difference when you are calm and at peace. Right. And then in the moment where Luke has to make the decision, right? He's the Emperor's trying to get him to kill his dad. He has compassion for his dad.
Right.
It's the having compassion for his shadow self, his dad, that makes him the greatest Jedi of all. Right. That's where he ascends to really become the powerful, Luke. So, anyways,
love that. Love that.
And end with a good Star Wars reference there, and really appreciate the comments here are amazing.
Wow.
So thank you for joining and for just adding really incredible value into the discussion. Yeah. Happy Halloween, everyone. I hope that you wear an amazing and fun or whatever costume, but beyond that, I hope that that you get to take off all the masks and you get to reveal the superhero that already exists within you. Right? It's there. We have everything we need inside of us to be that superhero version of ourselves. It's just a matter of being able to tap into it, to have the calmness inside, having a framework that allows us to know what that is. So,
love it.
All right, brother.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great conversation.
Great. Thanks.